Welcome, everybody, to the Week 11 NFL Draft Geek Prospect Review. I'm Brian Johannes, and just like the rest of the 10 weeks, I'm going to give you a rundown of how the top 2019 NFL Draft prospects did in their Week 11 games. So I kind of hit up on mainly the top games and go through that, and then hit up on the top prospects, highlight the guys that were covered in our 2000 or our Week 11 scouting guide. Let's not waste any more time. Let's get started. Alabama took on Mississippi State. This matchup was ripe with NFL draft matchups, prospect battles, whatever you want to call it. Alabama won 24 to nothing. I think the score wasn't a complete indication. I think Alabama just dominated this game. Offensively, Damian Harris, he only had 53 yards and a touchdown, 1 yard plunge, but he's continued to be a good prospect throughout the season. Tight end Irv Smith Jr., he had 5 catches for 70 yards. He had a big catch right at the goal line. You would like to kind of see him try to get into the end zone. He kind of just caught it and ran out of bounds, but continued to show his playmaking ability, his overall athletic ability. For Alabama's defense, it was the Quinnen Williams show once again. He had 6 tackles, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss. He's continuing to just be an utter dominant force in the middle of this Alabama defense. He's starting to now become a lot of people's number one defensive tackle, even getting above Ed Oliver, according to some people. So he's just continued to dominate as a redshirt sophomore. Isaiah Bucks continues to get sacks. He had another one in this game. A lot of times just kind of cleaning up, but just being a steady edge presence, kind of that 5 technique, oversized defensive end. Mississippi State had a couple good defenders also. Jeffrey Simmons, one of the better defensive tackles in this draft. He had 6 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, continuing to just do what he does, show elite strength, use that and burst to get into the backfield. Montez Sweat had 5 tackles in this game. I know Logan Fredrickson, one of our writers at NFL Draft Geek, was texting me during the game. He's just fallen in love with Montez Sweat. Says he's a top 15 prospect. He's continuing to show burst off the edge. I'm not quite there with Logan, but I definitely like him as a potential late first-round pick. The next game that we kind of looked at was Clemson versus Boston College. This is another game that I featured in my college football scouting guide. Clemson won 27-7. It was never really that close of a game. Guys that stood out: Hunter Renfrow had 8 catches for 80 yards. Guy that's been kind of forgotten about. He seems like he's been at Clemson for 8 years now. Just continues to win out of the slot with good quickness. He's your typical just quicker than fast slot receiver. Clemson's defense really stood out in this game. Kendall Joseph had 7 tackles, a sack, 1.5 tackles for losses, a run and chase outside linebacker. Austin Bryant had 6 tackles, 1.5 sacks, 2 tackles for losses. Clelin Ferrell had a sack. But the two guys that I really wanted to focus on in this game were their defensive tackles, and that was Christian Wilkins and Dexter Lawrence. Dexter Lawrence had a beautiful tackle for loss where he just drove back the interior lineman and got the tackle in the backfield, just kind of showing his power and burst. Christian Wilkins had a sack, kind of came as the running back rolled out, sprinted out there and got the sack. With Boston College being a pretty run-heavy team, it was up to those guys to really kind of live up to the billing to kind of slow this attack down. For Boston College, a couple of defenders to keep an eye on that we featured: Zach Allen, their defensive end, at 6'4", 6'5", 280-pound defensive end. He had 4 tackles, a batted down pass, steady Eddie on there on the edge. Lucas Dennis is one of the top-rated safeties in this class, safety cornerback hybrid. He had 6 tackles. Nothing really just stood out there. Moving on, Florida State got walloped by Notre Dame 42-13. Notre Dame continues to show that they are one of the elite teams in college football this year. Big reason why is their running back Dexter Williams, who's continued to shine since coming back from an early 4-game suspension. He had 20 carries for 202 yards and 2 touchdowns. His ability to run between the tackles, he had a couple of just gigantic long runs, just burst through the line and just ran away from everybody. He's named to really kind of keep an eye on. A junior who's kind of had a rocky past, has really thrived this year when he's recommitted himself. So he'll be a name to kind of keep an eye on. Alize Mack, their tight end, 2 touchdowns on 29 yards. He is basically just 2 touchdown catches, showing off his athletic ability. He's a junior listed, but he's been there for 4 years. All indications is he's going to enter in this NFL draft. And, raw prospect, but he's got the athletic traits. He can go up and win at the catch point. So another name to kind of keep an eye on as we continue to evaluate this tight end class. On defense, Tavon Connie, 7 tackles, continues to be a tackle machine off the at linebacker. And then for Florida State, their edge defender, Brian Burns, he had 7 tackles in this game, no sacks, no quarterback hurries. Notre Dame's a pretty run-heavy team, so that kind of neutralizes him. I think he also, doesn't help that there's not a lot of talent around him, so he sees a lot more attention. He's definitely a guy that's probably a top 20 pick at a minimum, top 15 pick, an athletic, bendy defensive end. You wonder how is he going to hold up against the run. He's a lighter guy, so just something to kind of keep an eye on as we go forward. Couple more games. Oklahoma State and Oklahoma had a shootout. The Sooners won 48-47. Kyler Murray is a name that we need to start paying a lot more attention to. He was 21 for 29 for 349 yards, a touchdown, and he had 66 rushing yards, 66 rushing yards. He's a guy, I'm going to have a feature out on him later this week. There's all this talk that he was, he's just playing this year and he's going to go back to baseball, and that very well could happen. But there's a lot of talk about him in the NFL draft, and so we need to really start to pay more attention to him. And like I said, I'm going to have a feature on him later on this week, so keep an eye out for that. His top receiver, Marquise Brown, continues to show his big play making ability. 8 catches for 142 yards and a touchdown. You get him in space, you get him going deep. He's very tough to deal with not only his speed, but his ability to track that ball downfield. A playmaker in a Deshaun Jackson type of mold. Staying within the Big 12, West Virginia won 47-10 over TCU. Will Grier, 25 for 39, 64%, 343 yards, 3 touchdowns and interception. Continue just to really lead this team and keep them in that hunt for a potential playoff berth. At this point, it's looking like them versus Oklahoma in the Big 12 title game. And Will Grier should be in that discussion for the Heisman. He's definitely been one of the best players in college football this year. His top target, David Sills, had 6 catches for 71 yards and a touchdown. Not a huge game for him, but just continuing to put out. I've compared him a lot to Cooper Kupp, and definitely a guy I think with his route running, with his size, he's going to be a guy that goes in the middle of the draft and contributes immediately. Moving down to the SEC, we had South Carolina couldn't hold on to their lead, and they lost to Florida 35-31. The player to keep an eye on this game, Deebo Samuel, 4 catches for 120 yards. He had a long touchdown catch for the Gamecocks. Him and Brian Edwards are they're 2 top receivers. Edwards is more of a contested catcher, where Samuel is kind of your slot. You can kind of have him do about everything. I've seen some Randall Cobb comparisons, and I don't think that's too far off. Just that type of player where he can give you a weapon out of the slot. Moving into the Big Ten, it was the morning game that we featured. Penn State ended up winning 22-10 over Wisconsin. Trace McSorley left early in this game. He was playing pretty well up until that point. 19 for 25 for 160 yards and a touchdown. Miles Sanders, their running back, had 23 carries for 159 yards and a touchdown. This Penn State team goes with how McSorley plays, and after having a really bad game against Michigan a week or so back, he kind of bounced back, but an injury would definitely be something to kind of keep an eye on. For Wisconsin, a couple guys that we highlighted. TJ Edwards had 14 tackles in this game. another space linebacker who's good in coverage, one of the better coverage inside linebackers, showing off that he can play in space. Dakota Dixon returned. He had 6 tackles, a half tackle for loss, and a pass defense. I've not necessarily compared him to Troy Polamalu in the skill set, like that talent level, but he plays a similar style, a guy that's going to line up all over the field, play in the box, play back in coverage, and he just kind of a do-it-all type of guy who plays with his hair on fire. For the Penn State, a couple guys, Amani Oruwariye, who had 4 tackles and interception, kind of a forgotten cornerback in this class. He's got size, he's got enough athletic ability, tremendous ball skills, probably a second-round pick, but you need to keep an eye on him. Their defensive end, Sharif Miller, had 2 sacks in this game. I highlighted him against David Edwards, and Miller shows his athletic ability. He's got size. He's got that speed. So he's a junior. So it's another player to kind of keep an eye on whether he'll declare or not. All right, for our last 2 games, we go out to the Pac-12. Arizona State got the win over UCLA, 31-28. If we're going to talk Arizona State, we've got to talk about N'Keal Harry. He had 7 catches for 100 yards. No touchdowns for Harry, but he continues to show out and say, hey, I'm the number 1 receiver in this class. He's still my number 1 receiver, and I think he's still a potential top 15 pick. UCLA, they have a tight end, Caleb Wilson, to keep an eye on. He had 11 catches for 164 yards and 2 touchdowns. Once again, this junior class of tight ends is really kind of keeping this good position. He was able to make run and catches, make tough contested catches. Definitely one of the top 3 or 4 best tight ends in this class. All right, last game we're going to hit up on is Oregon's loss to Utah. They lost 32-25. It was kind of highlighted by Herbert spiking the ball with no time left. They thought they could get one last second in there. Herbert was 20 for 33, only completing 60% of his passes for 288 yards and 3 touchdowns. His top target, Dylan Mitchell, a 6'2", 189-pound junior receiver, had 8 of those catches for 169 yards and a touchdown. It's been interesting. I think to really kind of see how Herbert does, you can't pay attention to the stats. You can't just watch the highlights. You have to dive into the tape. I know a couple weeks back he struggled against Cal. Didn't have the best numbers. I went back and watched that tape, and he played a lot better. He played very similar to how he did against Stanford in that marquee game for him. So I'm not too troubled by these stats. I want to, like I said just now, let's go back and look at the tape. He's still showing good accuracy. He's still showing the ability to throw with anticipation. He's still, to me, the best quarterback in this class. And if he declares, I think he's a lock for a top 3 pick. It all depends on where the Giants are picking and who trades up. But I'd be shocked if he fell out of the top 3. Well, that's going to go ahead and do it. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and the bell for your notifications. Thanks for watching.